we were getting a lesson.
We were.
We were getting a lesson in the commercial break from Warren Cottle,
schooled.
who's moving in. Before we get to the topics, Warren, go back to what you were saying. You have someone who's running for Congress, who's a former ambassador. What is the proper way to address them?
Well, this is supposed to be a personal and private conversation, but since now we're going to take it on the air.
Baby, too late now.
Too late now.
Is it clean?
When you walk in this room,
one of my friends one time
clean,
was interviewing somebody over the radio, and she referred to him as ambassador.
Mm-hmm.
She said, well, an ambassador? And so I said, to call an ambassador by that just title is about it's about as big a faux pas as you can do. They should, if they're a career diplomat, they're a career diplomat, they will keep that title, Mr. or Madam Ambassador, for life.
Okay.
If they're not a career diplomat, they lose that title as soon as they stop being an ambassador.
So it is inappropriate. It is the wrong protocol.
So the gentleman who is running for Congress, as far as I know, was never a career diplomat. He was a political appointee, so he should be addressed as Mr. whatever, or if he has another title, like doctor or
whatever.
You or hey you or something. But,
hey, mister.
Hey.
Yeah.
Now, how are they
Warren.
to know the difference?
Well, now
whether
we know.
he was a political appointee or otherwise?
Well, actually, they
now,
should.
Come on, Warren.
Actually, they should
slack.
not try to claim that title.
Okay.
And if they do, then you should just simply say, now, were you a career diplomat or were you a political appointee?
I love you.
How to win friends and influence people.
So we've been talking this morning, the latest in the Brussels attacks. There are some reports going around that the third person involved has been arrested in a suburb of Brussels. It's the third person who we're seeing on closed caption television. Obviously, ISIS took responsibility yesterday, not even 4 hours after it happened. What should President Obama do in his final months of office to combat this sort of terrorism? And what terrorism concerns will the next president have to deal with? Carol, we'll start with you.
No, that's what worries me, because remember what they did to Bush right after he came in. So I think they're waiting to see who gets elected as to how they will proceed. It was pretty obvious that after this, the terrorist was arrested in Brussels, that they pushed up their timetable, but I believe they were planning this all along. Obviously, you don't assemble this kind of attack overnight, so they were obviously planning this, and who knows what else they're planning. And I think they figured before the Belgian police could break him, they were going to push up the timetable and do as much damage as they could, which is exactly what they determined. How will our president handle it? How's he been handling it? I don't think you can call it workplace violence, because none of them worked there, but, it just not even calling it what it is. First, you have to acknowledge you have a problem. Right? We haven't even taken that first step on the 12-step program to acknowledge what the problem is. And I don't know that honestly, I don't know that he can be changed at this point. I think he is so invested in the man has governed by ideology, not reality, all along. And when you're that invested in your ideology, that puts the rest of us at risk. So I think, and of course this is nothing that anybody else hasn't thought. This just feeds right into Donald Trump's whole, stance on terrorism, on the borders, on immigration. I'll give him that. I'll tell you what, he really zoned in on that immigration problem and the anger and the fear that is causing in this country. And now you see, and step it up one level. California is allowing illegals to vote. They are allowing illegals to vote, and they can get away with it in state and local elections. They can't get away with it in federal elections. That's the latest report that I read. That I don't know that it's there completely, but I understand that is close to happening. And in New York, as you know, there's a group suing to allow illegals to vote. So this is the only way the Democrats can build their ranks, by admitting more people who are naturally their constituents. But anyway, this is when you have open borders and you have no stance on this stuff. I've read several articles. I have to believe there's some fire there, because there's a lot of smoke.
Warren.
Yeah, the thing about allowing illegals to vote, I mean, that's nothing new. I mean, it is a little bit different now, because at least they walk in there and cast their ballot, where in Louisiana we've allowed dead people to vote for years and for decades. And, Earl Long, I think, is still voting. friend of mine.
Yes, but did he vote once or more than that?
I think he voted more than once.
He voted early and often.
A friend of mine moved back to their old home place, and a voter registration card showed up in the mail, and God knows she should have kept it. Showed up in the mail for her father, registered as a Democrat right before the election about a year or so ago, and that man died in 1974. And
wow.
And she turned around and sent the card back. You know, and that was so horrible. All right, let's get back to the terrorist deal in Brussels and all this, that, and other. You know, the question is, what is our president going to do about it? And I think he's going to follow suit with about everything that we've been doing about it for the last I don't know how long. And it's not just our president; it's our whole government. It's the whole way that we have of looking at everything that goes on in the world today. The biggest problem that we made, I think, going back before the Iraq invasion and all that stuff, that we did not include the Russians. And that's one of the things I think Trump will do differently, is that Russia has the same problem that we have. They are having more terrorist attacks over there than what we had here. They have the deal with Chechnya, which is part of Russia, which is in open warfare with them. And Bush told Putin, said, well, you need to negotiate with them. And Putin sent back and said, why don't you negotiate with the bastards? Said, why don't you call bin Laden and invite him to the White House and y'all sit down and have coffee and discuss it? You know, the problem is what's going to happen when this thing gets a little bit further. I don't know what's going to happen in Belgium. I know Belgium has one of the largest Islamic groups, percentage of the population of any place in Europe. And that they were touting the fact that there would be a majority in Belgium within something like 30 years or whatever. So I don't know what's going to happen there, but I do know this, is that you have to combat fire with fire. And what we need to do is that if it happens here, you go out and you find the people and you arrest them and you bring them to justice. Of course, when you find them, if they resist arrest, then, you know, there's probably going to be some actions that's going to ensue and they'll wind up dead. And I think that, you know, if you had the Russians involved, you could just like contract a lot of this stuff out to them because they're not morally opposed to killing people, especially people who are trying to kill them. Yep. One of the things that really struck me was, I believe it was the first time I went to Moscow. It was in like 1998 or 99, and there was a picture in the paper there, and I never even heard of Chechnya, didn't know anything about it, but they had killed the main rebel leader in Chechnya, and they had a picture. They had a picture of the two people who killed him, who were the old, what used to be the KGB, that's now been changed to the Federal Security Bureau or something, FSU, whatever it's called. But anyway, they had the picture of the two guys who killed him with this guy propped up on a board like we used to do in the Old West, you know, when like Billy the Kid and whatever, and they'd drag him around and put him on display, you know. And you know, all the way along, they always denied any involvement, any of that. Our CIA did, you know. But now this one, they were so proud of it. They said, "Look, here." Anyway.
But Warren, it's not really equivalent because you really have a more repressive government in Russia than you have here, and so you know the Chechens, you can sort of understand the rebellion in some ways over there. They are terrorists. There's no question about it. But
and that's their deal. What they want is they want an Islamic government, just like you have in Iran, just like you have the ISIS want.
They want to be a breakaway for sure. Ted Cruz, I think, had it exactly right. He said when you see the immigration policies in Europe, this leads directly to this, and there's a direct line here because we let these people in from Europe without asking too many questions. But we don't know where they originated, where they came from. It doesn't matter where they came from. They have a European passport. They have more likelihood of getting in here. And Europe has had porous borders all along.
And it goes kind of expanding on that same topic, too. We had it in there. Are we at war? Is this just another world war that's being fought in piecemeal?
They are at war with us, for sure. There's no question about that. In their minds, they are at war with us. Maybe we haven't embraced that reality yet, and maybe it's what they call asymmetrical warfare. But it's there. It's happening, as Warren just said.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. I mean, you know, the fact is we have not, quote, been at war since World War II. Because when we go to war, we have to have a declaration of war that simply says we are at war. And that's been the biggest problem we've had all the way along, is you get in any of these outfits, these things that we've been involved with, from Vietnam on through today in Iraq, the military has not been in charge of the thing. The military people on the ground have been so hamstrung, and that were told things like, this started in Vietnam for sure, is that you cannot shoot at a muzzle flash at nighttime. You can only fire at a clear, distinct target. Now, you tell me anything that gets more asinine than that.
Yep.
And that came from some screwball in the military. You know, who was given to him by some screwball probably in the State Department.
And they dance around actually declaring war with the Gulf of Tonkin resolution and all these resolutions and things.
Which
but they never,
based on
the
lies.
same thing that Bush got from Congress and the rest of the world believed that WMDs were there, and I believe they were there too. I think they got them out of there before we invaded.
So Wingin' It Wednesday rolls on. Coming up, we're going to talk about the president's trip to Cuba. What does this really do? How does this benefit the country? And also a prominent figure in the professional tennis world under fire for some comments he made. Let's just say, I'm just going to say it like this. Maybe he forgot about two of the biggest tennis stars in our world right now, Venus and Serena Williams.
Maybe he's the biggest bonehead walking around right now.
We'll get to it coming up.
All of that coming up. And, of course, our friends over at Service Chevrolet, the sponsors of Wingin' It Wednesday, every Wednesday morning right here on Acadiana's Morning News on News Talk 96.5 KPEL. You can stop by, check out Service Chevrolet Cadillac. They're right there at 1212 Ambassador Caffrey. You know, they have hundreds of cars to choose from. They have over 300 Silverado trucks that you can choose from, all kinds of great vehicles out there. Look, if you're looking for maybe a luxury sedan, you will find that at Service Chevrolet Cadillac. If you are looking for a great truck, get a Chevy Silverado. Look for all of the savings. All the 2015 Chevy Silverados, the 1500, 2500, and 3500, 0% for 60 months. 0% for 60 months with approved credit through GM Financial. In-stock units only, good through the end of this month. That's 3/31/16. Maybe you just want a little vehicle, need something for the kids, or you need something for mom during the daytime. How about the 2016 Chevy Cruze Limited? $16,990 or $15,990, and you must own 99 or newer non-GM car as far as the trade-in. Find out all of the information that you want. Service Chevrolet Cadillac. Check them out today. 1212 Ambassador Caffrey. Great new showroom for Cadillac. It's all over there. 1212 Ambassador Caffrey. Service Chevrolet Cadillac.
7:39, and we're joined in studio again through the 7 o'clock hour. Hey, by the way, you can listen to Wingin' It Wednesday every Wednesday. It's a 7 o'clock hour. Today we had some news, so we started off with a quick report from Brussels, but then we usually post these on our website. You can go to our website, search Wingin' It Wednesday, and find everything there. Warren Cottle, Carol Ross here with us. They're regulars. They have their settings, how they want them. They come in, they pick up their mic. It's as if they're here every single day.
I know it, huh?
Love it. So we're going to move on.
It's like being at home for me.
Yeah, it sure is.
Back where I spent many happy years. Right here in this studio.
So the president's in Cuba, and there were questions before this whole Brussels thing happened. What is really being accomplished there? And after some sort of tense meetings and I'll say kind of painful to watch public appearance with Raul Castro, we are still wondering kind of what happened. Now with the Brussels attack happening yesterday, many people are wondering why he's not coming home but continuing on with an official visit to Argentina. Warren, we'll start this one with you. What gives Cuba?
First of all, I think that the opening of Cuba is about 40 years later than what it should have been. I have said all the way along, if you wanted, I haven't said it all the way along, but it took me a long time to come to reality. If you want to defeat communism, you introduce capitalism. And when the two of them collide, one of them is going to prevail, and that's going to be capitalism. And that it happened in the Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union, it happened in Red China, and it's happened everywhere it's taken place. If we had have opened up Cuba for trade, I don't think Castro would have lasted 2 years. But as it was, he's demonized the United States, just like Iran's doing. They're saying, all of your problems are because of the great Satan, the United States. The reason you don't have this is because of the United States. The reason you don't have new cars is because of the United States. If we'd opened up trade with them, those arguments would not prevail. Now, whether or not the way the thing was done, yes, should the president have gone there? Probably not. I think it's many more important places he should have gone to make a gesture of what the United States is standing for and this and that. I think that probably the best place for him to go right now would be go to Iraq and go over there and visit with the ISIS group and tell them that we're not going to stand for this anymore, and go out there.
Do they have baseball games there?
They don't have golf courses either.
Well, they got golf courses, but I understand they got oiled sand for greens. But, the big deal that you go down there, you get slighted by Ruel, who does not show up on the runway when you touch down, which is always in diplomatic protocol, is that the president, greets the other president or whatever. And this deal, I think Trump had it right when Trump said, I'd have just turned the plane around and come on back home. And then you get there, and our president makes his speech, and then Raul gives him a little lecture on what the United States needs to do and should do and ought to do and you're going to do, as I understand it, that our president stood there and kind of nodded in agreement and smiled, and then he went to the ball game, whatever. I think it's there was a lot better things I would like to have seen him do, but I do agree with opening up trade with Cuba. I know my friends in Puerto Rico do not like that because they said if Cuba opens up, we cease to exist because everybody go to Cuba and they no longer come here. But Puerto Rico has a lot of problems of its own right now. A lot of it came out of the Clinton administration when they changed some tax rules. But anyway, I think it's going to be a good thing overall to open up Cuba.
Carol?
Well, a little history here. They had capitalism, and Fidel Castro shut it down. And remember, when he came in, he was welcomed with open arms at the UN. It was he who began to shut down things. And in fact, there are several really touching stories. But I digress. Wasn't it just lovely to see our president standing with fellow travelers in front of the portrait of Che Guevara, one of the most murderous psychopaths in the history of psychopaths? I mean, just unbelievable. And to tell you the truth, if I were I am a capitalist. Maybe I should open up a T-shirt factory that manufactures T-shirts with Che Guevara's image on it. Oh, wait, that's already been done. I've seen kids all over the country wearing the little berets and the T-shirt and thinking how cool Che is. If they ever looked into his history, they would wonder. They would question. I saw kids here in Lafayette wearing those Che T-shirts. In fact, there was a picture in the paper maybe 10 or 15 years ago of a kid doing that. And I'm thinking, do his parents really understand what the heck that symbolizes? But there was our president, just happy as a clam with all the fellow travelers, and 51 seconds for the problem in Brussels, and now enjoying the baseball game, not rushing back, not looking at the world situation as it is. Maybe these people should talk to the ladies in white who get arrested every time they go out to march and on their way to church, not knowing where their fathers, their brothers, their husbands, their sons are. Maybe they should talk to the librarians who were jailed for the criminal action of actually wanting to read books. Imagine books that challenge the revolution. Maybe they should talk to one of the 70 fugitives given asylum in Cuba, including the cop killer Joanna Chesimar, a.k.a. Let's see, what is that name? Assata Shakur, Tupac's aunt. Anyway, when you see that, and the number of people, the amount of money actually that flows out of our country into Cuba, let me tell you, they've got a very black market economy going on right now. Millions of dollars go in. And remember, what propped up Cuba all those years was the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union was no more, that's when the downward slide started, because they propped them up for many, many years. And why would you reward people who almost brought this country to the brink of nuclear war and were pushing for it? Che Guevara was pushing for it. Anyway, the most poignant story I read was a young woman, Maria del Pino Suarez. Anyway, her father, she doesn't even know where his grave is. You know what her father's crime was? Believing in democracy. He was a revolutionary along with Castro. And when their points of view diverged, because Castro wanted to be this murderous thug, he came to the United States. He served in the United States military. By some subterfuge, Castro lured him back because he said he came back to save somebody. Brought him back to Cuba. When he did, they arrested him, tortured him, beat him, killed him, buried him in an unmarked grave, and she's been suing ever since to find out where her father is buried. Now, you tell me, how cruel do you have to be to do something like that?
One thing that stood out to me when the trip first started and hearing Raul Castro's remarks, what we call the trade embargo, they refer to it as if it's a physical thing, a blockade, that it's almost as if the people are being convinced we have ships that are blocking. You know, I mean, it's only 90 miles away from Florida.
Yes.
Did the comments about the blockade, does that stand out to you? I mean, or is this just like you said, them convincing?
When you jail all the independent journalists, as soon as they start writing anything, when you jail the academicians who try to teach the truth, yeah, exactly. You can keep a lid on everything. You can tell the people whatever you want to tell them, and over a period of time, they have no access.
Lauren?
He's got this look on his face.
Don't look at me that way.
Well,
That's
I'm
what
saying,
happens.
Jailing journalists and academics may not be a bad idea. That's a joke. That's a joke.
He says that sitting in a radio studio, a news radio studio.
Let's go back just a little bit. Talking about Che Guevara. You know, Che Guevara was so repulsive, so repugnant, so horrible that even the Soviet Union disavowed him.
Wow.
He tried to go in there, and they told him to stay out. Then he went to Africa and started his communist revolutions in Africa. He's trying to, and tell them that he was there on behalf of the Soviet Union. They said, you need to get out of there. You need to go somewhere else, or we're going to come kill you.
But they still have a shrine in Cuba, and I'm amazed. Was
Cubans.
that on the itinerary?
That is the Cubans, but look.
Was that on the president's itinerary to
The
go?
only one I saw was Jose Marti. That was the only thing on the official itinerary.
There's one school out there that says that the Soviet Union actually helped the United States track him down in Bolivia, wherever it was, and kill him.
It was Bolivia, yeah.
And that if you go back to, you're talking about the kids are not knowing, the youngsters not knowing. Our fine governor, when he was former governor, Bobby Jindal, when he was running, 8 years ago, I believe it was, somebody came out with a T-shirt with his likeness picture wearing that beret with the star on it. And said something about Louisiana Revolution or something, and that idiot didn't even disavow it.
Yeah.
And some of them were saying that that whoever put the thing out may not quite have known who Che Guevara was, and blah blah blah. But I mean, it's just how untouched we are from reality.
Once again, we get nothing for this. He goes there and he doesn't demand the return of the cop killer or the other fugitives from justice. He doesn't demand that the librarians be freed. He doesn't demand that they stop arresting the ladies in white and tell them where their family members are. No demands at all, just like the Iranian deal. We give them everything they want. We get nothing in return. And you think that's not resonating with the voters when Trump says, I know how to make a deal?
All right, Wingin It Wednesday. We have one more segment coming up. A major player in the pro tennis world, I guess you should say, had some interesting words this week for female athletes in the sport. We'll get our Wingin It Wednesday panel's take on it coming up at 7:49 at KPEL.
I think there's going to be a slugfest in here as they're talking about Megyn Kelly.
And they said we needed a third person to make things interesting.
Not if these two start fighting.
Okay. So
we just happen to have a difference of opinion. Megyn Kelly is a good journalist.
I said she was.
Yeah, but you also said other people write
Marco
her
Rubio
questions.
fed her questions.
Yeah.
Come on.
Well, yeah,
That was a legitimate question she asked, and if Trump, he's a big boy, he's a big boy, he's running for president. He should be able to handle little Megyn Kelly.
Yeah, and that question was written by a vice president for Fox News, whose daughter was the communication director of the Marco
you reading
Rubio
those
campaign.
Conspiracy theories? Come on.
And then
so
they
speaking of putting...
Let me tell you something. You cannot sit there in a live show, and she does her show live, every night and be a dummy and have to take questions from other people.
You have to be quick.
She's sharp. She has a great sense of humor, and she dealt with it with grace and aplomb. I thought when he started attacking her and the tweeting war that went on against Megyn Kelly, the bimbo. I mean, come on, a presidential candidate calling a journalist like Megyn Kelly a bimbo. Disgrace. Now,
using that term
having said that,
too
if
much.
he's the only choice I have against the other bimbo, you damn straight I'm voting for him.
So on the topic of putting one's foot in one's mouth.
Yes. Or just saying what they really think deep down inside.
There's a man at the center.
And there is that.
There's a man
there is.
at the center of a firestorm.
Being a woman.
A big controversy involving women's tennis. He's stepping down. Indian Wells tournament director and CEO Raymond Moore announced his resignation earlier this week. He stepped down a day after claiming that women players were riding on the coattails of the men. Carol?
Well, excuse me. I mean, we've had great women players, and we still have some great women players, that have done great work for the game of tennis. Now, in a way, I do, from a media standpoint, and Djokovic made this comment, because really, you think about it, it's all about the eyeballs. And if the eyeballs are attracted more to men's tennis, they get,
the sponsors,
get the money. They get more money. However, there's been equal prize money in all four majors over the past, the Australian Open, the U.S. Open, French Open, Wimbledon, since 2007. And combined Masters events like Indian Wells and Miami pay the same to men and women. And maybe that's what he was talking about, that even in those tournaments that maybe they don't get the eyeballs that the men's, tennis matches get and don't attract the amount of sponsorships, that's where he's talking about them riding. But what an inelegant way of just saying that, sometimes it's difficult to attract the big mega sponsors to women's tennis, which is why the game stepped in and equalized it, because, Now, here's what I've heard men say. I used to be a tennis player, and you'd hear them say, well, why don't they play 5 sets like the men do, in some of the major players. They only play 3 sets, Anyway, that being, I'm serious. You hear a lot of guys saying that. They should play 5 sets if they want equal pay. So the guy was stupid for saying what he said. There is a point deep down that could be made about the sponsorships, etc., but the way he said it was really stupid. It didn't help he's from South Africa. Hello.
All right, Warren, so we are in a room. We were 50-50, okay? It's me and you, and them two. Your
We're
thoughts?
Going to duke it out.
I really and truly think that this was about 5% about the women and 95% about him just making a stupid comment about his sponsors, that you go out there and you get people to donate hundreds of thousands of dollars, pay tens and tens of thousands of dollars to buy tickets and all this, that, and other. Then you're going to stand up there and say, well, this is sort of a second-class event or whatever. You have just insulted every one of them. And I think that's where the real problem came in there, and that, that to make some kind of statement like that is really a boneheaded statement to begin with. And you totally just threw it right back in all of those sponsors' faces, and they're sitting there saying, what in the hell did we just put up $500,000 for?
He begged us for all this money.
He came over, that's right, and begged me for the money. I signed the check, Who is this clown? And I think that's really why he resigned. But, let's just face the fact. The people who own the sports, the people who do the advertising, the athlete is just a commodity to them. They don't care whether that person's man or woman or not. They are just a commodity. They get killed out there. Well, maybe they're going to bring in revenue. Did our numbers go up or go down? Is anybody tracking that? How are they doing in the hospital? Get real. Sports is all about money. Yeah, that everything, if it started off with men, then the women came later. Are they riding on the coattails? I don't know and don't care. Do you get your money's worth when you go there and watch them play? Do you go watch them play? Do you enjoy watching? Yes, And that I never have been to the LPGA tournament. I want to go one of these days. I would like to, because I'm sure that you're going to see some really fine golf play. Mm-hmm. Of course, they don't tee off from the gold tees.
Golf.
Oh, gosh. Well, with that, we're going to wrap it up.
Quick. Congratulations, Lafayette High. They're going to Carnegie Hall. When my granddaughter was in the band, we went and saw them. It's an awesome experience for those kids. Congratulations. And also, go Cajuns. Basketball tonight in the Cajun Dome. Quarterfinals of the CIT. Go Cajuns.
Carol Ross and Warren Cottle, thanks for joining us.